This week on Body Count, we continue our exploration of Genghis Khan. Hello, and welcome to Body Count, the podcast where we believe history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. I'm your host, Jessica Manor, and I am joined once again today by...
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Frank Garcia, avid podcast listener, IT guru, and gym junkie.
Yes.
Definitely glad to be back, and I'm really looking forward to this next episode. So I'm excited to be working with you again.
Oh, guys, I've had the best time. He is on this Genghis stuff. We are kicking through this like professionals. We are loving it. So we are far enough into the show now that I'm done with all explanations, disclaimers officially. You know, we're kicked back on our various couches about to break down some seriously disturbing history. Only rule when we choose a subject to discuss, someone or a lot of someones, as is usually the case, are going to die. If you're listening to this episode, go ahead and back it on up for us. Start with part 1 of Genghis Khan, because this is a multi-part exploration of the life and times of the great Khan. And Frank Garcia and I love to talk about Genghis Khan. Today, we're going to explore the things that began to set Genghis Khan apart from everyone else in the Mongol world. We have talked about Genghis Khan for 2 hours thus far, and we are about to make that 3 official recorded hours. And there's a lot to get to, so let's get started, because right now, Genghis Khan is still the boy Temujin, and not yet even a Khan. Slow and steady wins the race, everybody. If you're going to cover maybe history's heaviest hitter, you come correct. Then again, the secret history could be complete bullshit, and we are back to trying to fuss out what we have from secondary sources written post-12th century. It's what we have. Speaking of, again, our source is Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World by Mr. Jack Weatherford. He is a cultural anthropologist. He's fussed out a lot of the work and groundwork so that we can just go off of his work. Thank God. So, you ready to get to it, Frank?
I am definitely. One quick thing. Did you ever make it out to a Genghis grill over your time?
I have not yet, but you know what's what's on our menu for tomorrow? We are going.
Okay, awesome.
Because Twitter has exploded for me, asking, 1, how I've never heard of a Genghis grill, and 2, why I haven't tried it yet. So apparently you're not the only person that understands just how awesome it is. I'm really, really stoked to try it out.
Sweet. I'm definitely glad. Definitely Twitter review that when you get the chance.
Oh, I'm going to shout it out to the rooftops. Okay, so when we left off last week, Temujin, aka Genghis Khan, had been captured by his enemies, longtime enemies, the Tayuchid clan, which, not a great idea to grab this particular tiger by the tail, but Temujin is still very young at this point. Once there, they strapped this kid, that's what he still was, a kid, to an ox yoke. These people were just so metal. Everyone in this story is so hardcore parkour, it's ridiculous. I would die in 2 seconds living like a Mongol. I can't fathom this is an 8-year-old kid, and they think that he's enough of a threat already that they're trying to break his will.
Yeah, his mindset to life right now is definitely survival. So you definitely know those tactics that he is building up right now are just, they're at 100%. How am I going to get away from this? What am I going to do? How am I going to get back to my family? So, his brain is on that whole different level to what we can understand as to what we think these days. Nowadays, we don't think about people being a threat or anything like that. And we definitely don't live this lifestyle at all. There's very few people in this world that live this kind of lifestyle where you're nomadic and always moving, just definitely a different culture than what we're used to.
Right? And we're certainly not the leader of our clan at 8 to 10 years old. Good Lord. So this yoke kept him from being able to feed himself or get a drink without help. And every day a new family was in charge of taking care of him. Now, the main branch of the Tayuchid had a bunch of war captives whom they kept as their servants, and Temujin was tended to by these families. None of these families were big fans of the Taichud, which comes as no surprise as they themselves were basically slave captives. So again, no big surprise that they were pretty cool to Temujin. So once in for the night, they would feed him, tend the wounds caused by this yoke thingy, and one family in particular took it off at night so that he could get some actual sleep. This one family seemed to connect with him extra hard, and that's, again, a testament to just how personable Temujin was, even then. Little wonder he would grow up to be such a Billy Badass. Like, can you imagine commanding that kind of presence at that age?
Yeah. I mean, like we've said before, his mindset's just on a totally different level. I'm still like trying to get a picture in my mind right now of what this yoke would look like. You know, I kind of get like this wood structure that's got like three holes on it, you know, one with my hands and my neck through it, but I can't, you know, there's not really a picture or anything you could just go and Google search, but it definitely seems like this thing was uncomfortable, not only to himself, but maybe other people that were in this kind of contraption, you know?
I agree. And it had to cause like chafing, had to cause everything. Plus it's strapped to his ankles. And that's the kind of, I don't get a picture of it, but I imagine it had to be pretty intense.
Yeah, I definitely had to build some kind of like mental toughness for him that I think later on he would be able to, you know, mentally be able to handle some tough things in life.
Oh, and does he? And he's definitely not going to take shit off of anybody once he escapes this, we know for sure. So, the Taichud couldn't intimidate Temujin or break his will. Remember, he grew up fighting like a mother just to survive. He was such a badass they couldn't keep him down for long, and Temujin was actually able to escape. Now, the Taichud were partying like it was 1199 one evening, and they left Temujin to the care of a differently abled member of the clan. Mistake. Temujin struck the boy with his yoke thing, which I'm just going to continue to call it because I can't pronounce the Mongolian word, just so we're all clear. Instead of jetting off into the night wearing the yoke thing, which he knew was certain death, he had some weeds close to the camp. Naturally, a search kicks off. Temujin was spotted by the father of the family that had been kind to him. But this man didn't raise the alarm. No, instead, he told Temujin to flee when it was full dark. But Temujin, he didn't do that either. But instead crept into their home late in the night, which, if discovered, those people would have been toast. They risked certain death not turning him in. Instead, they took off the yoke device, burned it, hid him in a pile of wood the next day while the Taichud resumed trying to hunt Temujin down. That evening, they sent him on his way with a horse and a cooked lamb, despite being poor as shit. Temujin managed to make it back to Oilun's camp. So, let's think on that. For a poor, basically slave family to risk everything to save a boy they didn't know, he really, really must have been a charming little SOB. More importantly, they made an impression on Temujin. Definitely. So, at this point, let's remind everyone with a little ancient step 101, nothing but family ties mattered in a clan. Mongol belief was that if you weren't related to me by blood or marriage, you were just an enemy. And that only really mattered at this time if you were valuable to the group in some way or an aristocrat. After all, he had a close kinship with the Taichud through his father. They had abandoned him. They had abandoned his family of only women and young children, and now they were actively, trying to kill him. Temujin learned from this experience that aristocracy was bullshit and that he could 100% trust people that weren't directly related to him. These two principles were to be a big part of Temujin's future. He now judged people on their actions and not their bloodlines. This was unheard of on the steppe. As a matter of fact, we as a society never have fully grasped that fact. And I think that's really, really interesting. And one of the most interesting things about him, even as a kid this young, he'd already started to form ideas about when he was in charge, what he would do and how he would almost measure people by their abilities and their merits, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It's crazy to me how he's being I don't want to use the word judgeful or judgmental, but he can judge people on how they are just by, interacting, very little interaction with them. This clan that took him pretty much left him and his family for dead, and they had so much hate towards him. But the people that were also included as slaves didn't see Temujin this way, which is just crazy to me that they're willing to help him and say, hey, look, we're going to get you out of here. We're going to do what we can to make sure you get as far as you need to survive, but then you're going to be on your own.
Yeah, exactly. And again, how poor, like giving up a whole lamb to those people, that's like months of food. That's things that they needed. That's crazy to me that they saw that much in him already. And I will go ahead and spoiler a little bit. They will not regret that decision in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely like they can see it as well. Like this kid has something about him that we know later on it could either come to benefit us or help us in some way. It's almost like it's planning out the future for him. Like they know he's going to be something great that he could later help them with.
Exactly. And again, there must have been something about this dude that you just knew. Like, maybe it's a rocky start and it might take him a while, but you know that there just must have been something about him. I don't know, maybe just mental toughness. We don't have that anymore, but it's crazy.
It's definitely hard for us to express to our users, like, this kid is very young. Like, there's not some kind of, somebody writing down every little piece of his life. So it's little things, little scriptures that people wrote or, noted about him that we're able to find out this information.
And we're able to keep it through basically oral histories. And that is incredible to me that he was that charismatic, that this at least stayed. We don't know exactly how much of it is, gospel or Bible, but it obviously was enough that it created this huge storytelling arc and fabric around him. So there has to be something to it to me.
Yeah.
So no one knows exactly how long, according to the secret histories, Temujin was in captivity. But it was probably for some time, as the secret history picks up again in 1178, when Temujin turned 16. And it has been several years since his father's death. He now has the time and confidence to go back and marry Borta. She had waited for him all this time. Now, when you got hitched on the steps, you were given like a high-class piece of clothing, like the fur to end all first. Most prized on the step, black sable. Normally, men gave this gift to their fathers, leaders of their tribe group, but Temujin already had a better idea. His new family needed some security, and he was growing tired of not having someone watching his back. The steppe north of the Gobi Desert had some Swingandees, much more powerful at this time than the Mongols. In the center, Ongkon with the Kiryat tribe. To the west, the Naimon tribe. And the Taeyong Khan was in charge of them. And then there were the Tatars to the east. And they were vassals of the Jurchid and the Altan Khan. Now, these lands had some insane appraisal values as far as steppe territory went. And were all very large, all very powerful. All of these tribes were constantly warring with each other, enlisting the help of the smaller Mongol tribes to kind of fight it out with each other. The clans of the Mongols were scattered at best, but these clans were large groups of tribes under single khans. So, we got to go back a little bit. Temujin's father, Yesugei, wasn't related to Ongkong of the Kiryat tribe, but he hadn't merely been a vassal either. When Yesugei and Ongkong were really young, Yesugei helped Ongkong become the Khan of the Kiryat by killing his uncle, the then Khan. So they had like critical bro status, if anything. And the two had also fought the Merkid together. When Temujin was born, Yesugei had been on a campaign with the Ongkong against the Tatars. So, on the steppe, to be allies, we know that you had to be in the same family. Therefore, if you weren't related, you had to get that ceremony related, like Temujin and Jamaka did with the blood brother stuff. Yesugei and Ongkong had been on this as well. So now Temujin sought to be essentially the ceremonial son of Ong Kong, and renew that bond. Temujin would gift the black sable to Ong Kong, and if he accepted, he was recognizing Temujin as an in quotation marks son, and Temujin would be entitled to all the protection Ong Kong had to offer. And Ong Kong eagerly accepted, even offering to make Temujin a local leader over some other young warriors, which again, the guy must have had a presence, because this wasn't just a pushover from all these scattered Mongol tribes. This was basically a king in his own right that was like, you want to stay here, do some work for me? I don't know. It just like, I can't speak enough about what a presence he must have had. And we don't know what he looks like, but he must have been a big dude and a strong dude. He just must have, I don't know, there must have been something about him.
Yeah, he must have had a different presence than other people around him to have had this kind of impact, on neighboring tribes to be, fear him a little bit, or to have leaders be like, hey, we see something in you. Let's give this a shot. I'm going to give you some warriors, some soldiers that I think you'll work well with. Or, I mean, this guy could have given him soldiers that were kind of, bottom of the barrel. Let's see what he can fucking do with them, because I'm about ready to get rid of them.
Exactly. He must have spoken really intelligently, I feel like, as well.
Yeah, it's crazy to me, like going back a little bit about how much tribe diversity there is at this time. Like you've got this one here in the east, you have this one in the northwest. Like it's almost like it's a gangland, don't step on my turf, I mean, you'd have to really kind of paint yourself a picture of, well, this is our territory here, and these people are ready to fight at any given second,
I just imagine it's the whole movie of the warriors, but like on the steppe, everybody's just constantly, warriors come out to play 24/7. It's crazy to me.
Or if you wanted to get like a modern day feel, I kind of think of that North Korea, South Korea border where those people are just standing there waiting,
Yeah, that's exactly it, actually. That's exactly it.
That's at least what comes to my mind is that, like, oh, you're going to move first? Well, you move first and I'll shoot you, kind of, they want to stand big and bad and not give in.
Everybody's just standing at the edge constantly, like sharpening their swords and honing their bows. Yeah, that's exactly right. So Temujin, as we know, gave like zero fucks about tradition, and he wanted protection for his family and a small tribe. Once he knew he had it from Ong Kong, he went right back to his family. And they lived happily ever after, in peace, harmony. Of course not. But that seems to be, essentially for a time, what Temujin was after. But fate yet again intervened, and we wouldn't live in the world we live in today if it hadn't. So, enter the Merkid. It was the way of things on the steppe to never forget a slight, kind of like what we were talking about on the border situation. But those slights weren't always repaid in a timely manner. Oilun, Temujin's mother, had been stolen from the Merkid by Temujin's father, but Oilun was damaged goods now, and they had their eyes on a much prettier, more fertile prize, Borta. And it was time to pay the piper. So Temujin and his men managed to escape this Merkid revenge raid, but they did capture Borta. Now, Temujin could have simply have counted her as lost, but that wasn't really his style, was it? More than that, it became apparent to Temujin that the nature of life on the steppe meant he would never just be left in peace. There would always be another raid or some bullshit like that. And if he was going to live with his family in some semblance of safety, he needed to gain power by getting in there, mixing it up. But I will say that wasn't all that went into it. He wanted Bort back. Temujin loved her, or at very least valued her and her counsel above a great many others. Later in life, her counsel was the only family advice he would actually ever seek, more or less take. If Temujin wanted Borta back, and he did, he would have to take her. Enter Ong Kong. Never was like a sweet-ass goat a better investment, because it just so happens that Ong Kong had a burr in his saddle over the Merkid, and now he had a reason to come at them.
Yeah, it's like all the pieces are just falling right in place for him to do something big, you know?
He just always made the right move at the right time. The guy was a chess player before there was like serious chess.
Yeah, he was always a step ahead of you. Like when he knew he could either battle out and lose himself or his men, or he could play it smart, let them take Borta. But as soon as he took Borta, he was already two steps ahead of the other, that one that was getting the revenge on him. He was already two steps
Exactly.
ahead of them to figure out a plan to get her back.
Exactly, because he knew that On Khan had a problem with the Merkid. So, I mean, he was just already on. You're exactly right. That he had thought well enough ahead in case something did happen. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. And On Khan was no fan of the Taichid either. So, On Khan then sent Temujin to find additional support from an ally of his that headed up the Jetaran tribe of Mongols. And surprise, surprise, who would this be except Temujin's Onda, his blood brother from another mother, Jamaka. And Jamaka came when called, only too happy to be reunited with Temujin and kick some Merkit ass. So, Temujin had survived up to this point, but he had never been the raider, the attacker. But no worries, because he was about to prove himself more than capable of leading an attack. It ended up being less of a raid and more of a rout. The Merkid just fled, and Temujin rescued Borda. The story's very touching in the secret history, but not exactly historically relevant. Remember, these two crazy kids were still well under 20 years old at this point. I can't remember what I was doing at 20, but it sure as hell was not this.
Yeah, I was not out fighting battles and rescuing the love of my life. I was probably doing the complete opposite.
Yeah, exactly. If I was even getting off the couch that day, this guy's thinking 20 steps ahead. That is the craziest part. He is not yet 20 years old while this is all going down. I mean, he got an early start in life, and I think that's part of why he was so capable of getting so much accomplished, because it started at 6, man. So, we're going to skip all of that kind of stuff. But when Borta was returned to Temujin, she was unfortunately pregnant. Now, no one knows who the child's actual father was, but let me tell you, it would be a century-long debate in Mongol history. Didn't matter, however, as Temujin named him and raised him as his eldest son. More than a son who was or was not his, Temujin had also regained his relationship with Jamaka. Now, Temujin decides at this point to combine a small band with Jamaka's large band, and for the third time, the two made the vows of sworn brotherhood, this time as grown men and a public ceremony with everyone as a witness. Now, they were moving on up faster than the Jeffersons at this point because they were leaving the forest and going to live on some of that prime step real estate, like call the appraiser, because they were going from hunter to herder. So this was a higher standard of living for his family, who were no more living hand to mouth. Just by having access to herd animals and a way to sustain them, they were now guaranteed consistent access to meat and dairy products at the very least. That's not even including all the things you could make from the animals.
Yeah. So, we like to think that as they move to this steppe prime real estate land, I mean, they're coming from some rural mountain terrain that is like very vicious in that part of the world. They're having to deal with animals who are possibly hunting them at the same time. We don't really know that, but, we have to think that they're going from some terrible place to now things are getting a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right, because you're exactly right too. I mean, they were being hunted by the things they were hunting just as much. Like, I think that also contributes to why he was so tough. And we're going to get into aristocracy and how things worked on the lower step here in a minute, but nobody else had lived as tough as he had lived. Nobody else knew what sacrifice was, not that they weren't all incredibly frightening and tough people, but he just was extra, if we will. Now that you've got all this access to these things, you also have to realize Temujin never lived as a herder before. So there was an awfully lot for him to learn. And Temujin was content to learn it for a time. More than that, moving from the mountains to the steppe and joining a large band meant that they were targets of raids now more than they had ever been in the mountains. And that was something Temujin didn't have to learn. He made a hell of a steppe warrior. No surprise there.
We really have to understand that he's just building knowledge as he goes. He's almost just a sponge, just soaking it all in. Like the more that he learns, the better of a leader, better of a person. I mean, this guy's becoming.
Not only that, but an interesting thing to me about him too, wasn't afraid to try and fail. Like there was no shame or embarrassment. He wasn't, that alpha male type, which is kind of what we want to think of when we think of Genghis Khan, but that wasn't the case. He was more than okay with failing because he never forgot the lessons that he learned from it, even as something as simple as hurting. But he definitely stepped up on the warrior part as well too. That became something that he also didn't really have to work too hard at that.
Yeah,
it's incredible to me. So before we go any further in the story, we have to take a break for a second. We've kind of danced around it to talk about steppe hierarchy and aristocracy. Now, we kind of, but didn't really explore it in the first two parts, and it's about to become important for the remainder of the story. Therefore, let's break from our story for a moment and talk about how shit worked in a Mongol band. Aristocracy and hierarchy were derived from who your ancestors were and how highly they ranked and where they ranked in the oral histories. Now, within a band, there were white bone lineages and black bone lineages. You following so far? Does that make sense?
Following.
Okay. So white bone lineages drew from the leader and those that were closely related to that leader. One usually became a band leader or a Khan, or were even entitled to try because they were already aristocrats from aristocratic families. Everyone else, the black bone lineages, drew their rank from how closely they were related to the white bone within a particular band. These relationships were essentially an idiom through which the Mongols negotiated and enforced their claims. You could only be white-boned within a band at which you and your immediate relations were at the center, kind of, i.e. the leader. Now, why is this important? Bands could look down on other bands due to their perceived level of aristocracy according to their ancestors' place. These familial claims were used as pretext pretty much to start shit or exert dominance, when the real reason was just humans being humans. Jealousy, perceived threat, someone has shit you want, etc. Now, we know Temujin had zero respect for this ridiculous shit, as it didn't really mean anything. What happened to his family was proof that he would never, ever forget about this ridiculous system. He saw reality for what it was, and he judged people by their abilities and their loyalty. That was going to be a big thing in the future. So, Temujin and Jamaka were distant cousins, but Jamaka placed himself at the center, the rightful leader, as it were, of the band by demonstrating constantly that he had the higher lineage, despite the fact that Temujin never challenged him. So, as time passed and Temujin grew more powerful, more popular, Jamaka began to really emphasize he was more aristocratic. He began to treat Temujin less and less like his Anda and more like his younger brother. We all remember how Temujin responds to being treated lesser based on bullshit versus merit. Remember his older, now very dead half-brother. Like, we remember that. Like, good point on that one.
Very, very dead's is an understatement. I mean, he's pretty much gone at this point.
And left to, like, make a point.
Yeah, I definitely, for the listeners, it's the white-boned, black-boned stuff may be a little bit confusing to understand, but I promise it's not that difficult. It's just take a little bit of a second and kind of listen back if you can, if we kind of spoke too quick. But I promise that part is not too hard to understand. Don't you agree?
I totally agree with that. Like, even if you do back it up 30 seconds and kind of think about it, whereas if you're at the center and kind of how it runs out after that, just know that Jamaka thought that Temujin, even though they were blood brothers, was still going to be beneath him. Jamaka grew up aristocratic and with everything handed to him. So he was a little bit of a twat, for lesser words.
He definitely lived the opposite lifestyle of Temujin.
Yeah, exactly. And in the future, he's gonna learn. He
Yeah.
will learn. Now, it all came to a head, as you can imagine, soon enough. So Jamaka and Temujin always rode together at the front of the train of followers, as nomads do. They were on the move one day. Maybe Jamaka feared Temujin's ever-growing popularity, or he'd just gotten a little big for his britches and wasn't into sharing anymore. Doesn't matter. Jamaka made a decision, and on this day told Temujin he would make camp closer to the mountains with the horses. Temujin was instructed to take the less prestigious animals and set up another camp nearer the river. And that seems innocuous enough, but let's translate that from Mongolian symbolic relationships into something a little easier to understand. Jamaka was basically saying, Temujin, I'm the aristocratic horse herder, and you're nothing but my shepherd, like my shepherd boy.
Yeah, you could definitely tell, just like knowing from the past, he's not going to be looked down upon. I mean, we've said it time and time again. He is here to take the role and be a leader. And Jamaka being the way he is, I was handed everything my whole life and I know what I need to do, but he's never faced reality like Temujin has.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I also, I don't know. I just think that it's also a testament. Jamaka wasn't maybe the best judge of character, and he couldn't see what he was doing here because, again, Temujin had never challenged him to this point. It's almost kind of sad to me because to Temujin, he was very religious, essentially, and that's going to be a big thing in the rest of his life. He always believed in shaman. He always prayed before battles. He was religious. So to him, I think he took this ceremonial brothership very, very seriously, where to somebody who was basically a spoiled brat like Jamaka, it was just it's a thing we do. And it wasn't that way to Temujin.
Yeah, it definitely comes back to his loyalty. Like, hey, you're taking care of me. I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to give you 100% of what I have to offer. And I don't think Jamaka is really seeing that. He sees it as more of like, hey, I'm testing you. He's testing me, and I'm going to push back. When in reality, I think, this is my unbiased opinion, I think Temujin is just, he realizes he's in a spot now to help, be loyal to his people, and start to give back to the people because some gave back to him to help him get away from that Taichit clan and all that.
I think you're exactly right. And when we wrap this all up, we're going to show what the Mongols actually did do for modern society. But I think that it started there with Temujin because you're right, loyalty is going to be a big factor that goes forward in this entire story. He just was not going to stand for anything like what the Taichit had done to him and his family. But more importantly, he really was, and we're going to see as time goes on, the things that he began to institute are things that we value in our society today, like really, really value in the way that we live free, conduct ourselves, take care of those less fortunate. And it began and ended here with him. And he just couldn't understand Jamaka's sudden change of heart. But he wasn't there for it either. I can tell you, you get one chance with Temujin, and after that, it's done.
Yeah, there's no rebuilding any bridges there.
Nope, not a one. So Temujin immediately drops back to his family in line, and Borta, and I love her because for the rest of this story, she's pretty serious too. Borta wasted no time getting pissed when she heard this. She insisted, like angry as could be, that they break with Jamaka immediately, and anyone that wanted to follow them could follow. Basically, fuck it, babe, we're doing our own thing now. That night, Temujin and his entourage fled and put some serious distance between themselves and Jamaka, and many of Jamaka's followers fled with them. Jamaka, despite the split of the band, did not pursue. And this is the very beginning of what's to be a 20-plus year fight between these two men to be the leader of all the Mongols. But Temujin had much to learn in the course of becoming the leader of all the Mongol tribes. And make no mistake, he was going to be the leader of all of them. He had had enough of all the division, the raiding, making war on each other. He had bigger plans. He already could see what needed to be done. But he knew they had to start by uniting the Mongols all together into one tribe like that of the Tatars or the Kiryat. So he just declared himself the leader. He declared he would be the one Khan of the Mongols. He had a small band for now, but Temujin wasn't going to lie about his ambitions. Temujin went to Ongkong of the Kiryat to reassert his loyalty, saying basically, look, ceremonial dad, I'm not coming for you. I'm just saying I'm putting all of the Mongol tribes together, and we will be your vassals. Ongkong was like, yeah, whatever, ceremony son, great. Like, I'm not really all that interested. But it's important to note he was kind of basically doing the same thing with Jamaica. It wasn't in Ongkong's best interest to have all the Mongols united into a single tribe as neighbors. By playing Temujin and Jamaica off of each other, he could keep the Mongols weak and subservient. Regardless, Temujin wasn't too worried about that for now because he had enough power either way to function as Khan of his now minor group. And it was here he started practicing the changes that would make him very different from any Khan before him. In Temujin's band, there was going to be a new power structure. So I think it's interesting that he already was like we talked about, getting a couple steps ahead, covering his ass as much as he possibly could, even though he knew what was going on. But by establishing himself as Khan of this small band, he's going to start right from the beginning that once people start to join, like this is the way it's going to be. The old way is dead. I'm not doing anything by the book anymore.
And it definitely pays off for him, as we'll see.
Oh, does it ever. So, again, we know Temujin didn't give two shits about who's related to him or to whom else. He began giving jobs and positions according to how able and how loyal you were. And Temujin Khan was really, really, really good at seeing people's talents and flaws and giving them the job to which they were best suited. Temujin also created and began training an elite unit of warrior bodyguards that surrounded the camp all hours of the day and night in shifts. And it doesn't seem like much, but this was really novel in Mongol culture. He wasn't going to get taken by surprise in this raid culture. So he's already essentially 3 steps ahead of everybody else that's living out there.
Yeah. And it's crazy, that he's able to read these people and really understand, it goes back to his care and his loyalty to his people. Like, hey, I understand that you have some possible disabilities here and we could use help in this area of our camp. So do this. You take care of me, I'll take care of you. But you're like, it's a well-oiled machine. Like everybody's doing their part to make sure everyone is taken care of.
Exactly. He didn't just write people off because they couldn't be a warrior and that was their only job there was. You could take care of animals. You could help with the sick. You could tend to this. You could tend to that. There was no job that was too small, and everybody had one, and everybody was valued equally because none of it worked without everyone, which is just, again, for growing up in a culture and never having seen that, and he had already dreamed that up, tells you kind of what a thinker he was.
Yeah, like it's almost like he was already planning or saw that Jamuka was changing his thoughts on him. So he was like, all right, I know that these people are loyal to me. This is what they're good. Like his brain functionality is on a totally different level to understand, like just put all the pieces together, at least what we think is really quickly,
Yeah, no, and I mean, it was because this just wasn't done. It was something that had existed in much, much older cultures, but that knowledge had never made its way to the steppe. This was just him inventing all of this, which is really amazing to me. So despite these successes, the aristocratic Khans and the white bone folk of the steppe, in particular Jamaica, saw Temujin Khan as nothing more than a black-boned upstart that other black-boned people idolized. So basically, it was kind of that, and I hate to use this, but it's the best way I can explain it, that 1% was like, ugh, he's nothing. He's just, a low-class piece of shit that all the other low-class pieces of shit are going to start rallying around. But he's no threat to us. And can I just say at this point in the story, the more things change, the more they stay the same, because that's pretty much the kind of society that we all live in continuously every day up until this point. And you see that repeated throughout history. And it's just really interesting to me that it happens here, even though they didn't and hadn't really been influenced by the outside world for a very, very long time. And it's even kind of cooler to me that Temujin Khan's about to come in and start shaking all of that up. So, 1190, Jamaica uses the killing of one of his kinsmen by Temujin's people as an excuse to raise his followers to battle. Jamaica's much, much larger band naturally routed Temujin's in this first proper meeting of enemies, taking many captives. Because what we have to remember is Temujin's comparatively got this tiny band of people. So Jamaica was feeling really, really high on this victory, and he decided he needed to overcompensate, and he does something that he really should not have done. He first defiled the body of one of Temujin's captured generals by cutting off his head, and Mongolians weren't fans of blood, and this is where the soul was said to dwell. It makes me really happy as a Game of Thrones fan. It's almost like watching the Dothraki people, and that's very much what this is modeled off of. So, not fans of blood, head was where the soul dwelt, and then he tied it to the tail of the horse that he rode, which was essentially disgracing this man's family. Jamaica then boiled alive, yes, I said boiled alive, the other male captives that he had taken, which in Mongolian culture essentially destroyed the soul. Temujin would not forget this, but more importantly, it was viewed as monstrous by a great many people of the steppe. Temujin may have lost the battle, but he was winning the propaganda war. This ghoulish overkill did some serious harm to Jamaica's image on the steppe. More people would move their support to Temujin despite his loss of the battle in the end, as they were growing increasingly afraid of the overly cruel Jamaica, and people saw that no matter what their birth status was, they could rise high with Temujin Khan. And that's interesting to me. He's already using propaganda. That's pretty freaking clever.
Yeah. And I think this is a good thing to point out is how people respect the culture. When we think of wars today, we do see people being hung or, their bodies being carried throughout the street like they're just trash. But back in this time, when you fought a war against another neighboring tribe, yeah, okay, we lost the war. You do what you need to do. You lost people, but we're also going to respect you and not just trash them, like modern day society now. So it goes to show you the level of respect that neighboring clans did have or kind of had, and how Jamaica took it to a whole nother step to kind of assert his dominance, which was the wrong thing to do, because not only did it kind of push his members away from him, but they lost respect for him at the same time. It's like, you don't do that. Why would you do that?
And I think that is kind of a testament. And once this all finally shakes out, just how much these white-boned aristocracies saw themselves as above the law and above the rule of spiritualism, which was so important in Mongolian culture. And you're exactly right. He hurt himself, but it's also interesting to me that even though Temujin lost this war, he didn't waste any time using that propaganda. Not only that, But he wasn't going to forget that slight, like that you did the wrong thing. And like we said, he was pretty religious. I mean, in a sense, he would have to be to have gone through all the things he's already gone through and come out the other side. Like, he's going to respect those things and traditions that have stood for thousands of years on the steppe. So, I mean, Jamaica, this was his first big screw up, and there are going to be a lot to come. So, it's apparent to Temujin Khan that if he was going to defeat Jamaica, he still needed a lot more support. I mean, at the end of the day, no matter how good your warriors are, if you're outnumbered 10-1, you're still going to lose. So, in 1196, an excellent opportunity arose for Temujin to do just that in the form of a foreign raid with Ong Khan that skyrocketed his military prestige and economic power. Ong Khan raided the Tatars, whose territories were near the Chinese Empire, and it was full of manufactured goods. As a consequence, the Tatars had all of these manufactured goods. None of this shit had ever been seen on the steppe, but the Tatars were simply routed, and Ong Khan and the Mongols carried away whatever they could, fine, from slaves to booty. It's at this point that Temujin saw the fallibility in merely dispersing the conquered in order to take their goods, which would leave them free to reorganize and eventually seek retribution, which I think was also another really important thing. He could see that the cycle would just continue. And so he's already developing a new way to end this cycle. He's got to do something different because people are just going to keep coming back to be your enemy.
Yeah. And they'll just keep claiming to be, well, I'm this Khan, I'm that Khan. We do it this way. It's always been done this way. And he sees that it can go a different way and it can be improved,
Exactly. So, when Temujin returned home with the goods and dispersed them among his followers, and no one missed that either, Temujin was taking economic care of his followers as well, which gained him, as a consequence, even more followers. He still knew he was far from in a position to take down Jamaica and the large bands that followed him. He could push out the smaller ones, though, and acquire their territory, which, again, unheard of. And he started with the Jurchen band of Mongols who were loosely related to him, though considered themselves more white-bone than Temujin Khan, and so as a consequence looked down their noses at him pretty much. Yeah. Now, the Jurchen had agreed to ally with him in this Tatar raid, and when it was time to go, basically ghosted him, which was a public vote of no confidence in a raid leader. Now, while he was gone, they did something even worse and raided his base camp, killed 10 of his followers, and stole tons of stuff. Temujin Khan did not forget, and now he was home. So in 1197, he came against them, and he had gotten a lot of practice in the years since Jamaica defeated him, and he crushes these people. But he did something different. Temujin had not come for the Jurchen's possessions. He come for the Jurchen themselves, which, again, we've got to understand is novel on the steppe. You just raided and you took people's shit and you left them whatever. He came for them in particular, which, novel.
I think it's an important thing to look back on is when him and the Ong Khan raided the Tatars, like he didn't just take his fame for himself. He shared it with his people and dispersed it, like you said, dispersed it among every one of his followers. Like, I am no better than you. You helped me get to where I am. I'm going to share this equally with you. And with the Jurchens, it just comes back to, don't screw me. Because if you screw me, I'm going to screw you 10 times harder. And exactly that's what it's coming out to be now.
Exactly. And he's here to teach you that lesson that, look, you could have shared in all of this, but instead you chose essentially to be a bitch, and now I am here to teach you a lesson. When he was done, he was just done with this attack and counterattack, endless cycle of bullshit that was occurring on the steppes and essentially hurting the majority of the Mongol people. So, Temujin Khan captured everyone in the Jurchen tribe. Every single person, army, leaders, civilians. Then he convened a gathering of his own followers and put all the Jurchen's aristocratic leaders on public trial, where they stood accused of not fulfilling the terms of their alliance and then using his absence to raid their own allies. They were found guilty because, yeah, they did exactly that and were summarily executed right there in public. So Temujin Khan was announcing that the 1% and the 99% was done and giving aristocrats everything, all that special treatment. It was over. And he was teaching everyone also the value of loyalty. Once that was taken care of, he did something even more radical. He occupied the Jurchen lands while holding his own. So basically saying, all of this is mine now, and it's never going back to these people. And they're now my people as well. So once that was settled, the occupation was settled, he housed the remaining Jurchen with his own clan. Yeah, it was to keep an eye on them, but the secret history also notes, very importantly, they were not slaves. They were taken in as members of his own tribe in good standing. In a gesture meant to symbolize this, he adopted an orphan from the Jurchen camp and presented him to his mother Oilun to raise as a new son, a practice he would do with each and every tribe that he was to absorb from now until his death. And that was basically stating, he's my brother now, and the Jurchen will be brothers to all of you now. Which, that is also a fundamental difference. Instead of punishing people, taking them as slaves, no. We're not any better than you. You're not any better than us. We executed the problem. You didn't get to make that choice. That choice was made for you. And now, if you'll be loyal and you join me, you are going to prosper along with me.
Yeah. I think there's two very good points to look at here. One, when they were finding the Jurchens guilty, I mean, he pretty much, we don't know the timeline of this, whether days, weeks, months, or years. He pretty much just stood up a whole court system himself right then and there, like proving them guilty, finding them that, hey, you're going to be executed. Sorry about you. Sorry you were a bitch and screwed me over. Like, he's putting this together to almost form a nation of what we can see is formed today, with like our court systems and how things are kind of run. And then at the same time, like, if listeners are just now dropping in and listening to this part, you're going to be very confused. Wait, he's taking a son from another tribe and like joining them together? Like, this guy is not a ruthless son of a bitch like people make him out to be. Like, he's joining people together that should have been joined together all along, but people didn't want it to be that way.
Exactly. It's exactly, and it's like we talked a lot about the Mongols. This is the beginning of this international court system, and you could almost say like a bit of a basis for everything that we have today. It was a public trial. They were allowed to defend themselves, but there wasn't really a defense. That was the point. He wanted to show in front of God and everybody, this is what they did. This is why they deserve a punishment. There's no defense for it. You're exactly right. And that's really, really interesting and a big point. And it's going to be an even bigger point on an international scale later.
Yeah. I mean, we could even think that, there's so many different tribes. They have to have some different beliefs or some kind of different God or something else. But I mean, they don't. I mean, they essentially follow all the same moral principles. They're just under different people who said, hey, my dad was this and he was a big guy and is a big leader, and your family is shit, so you're going to come with me. It all started out with people just thinking that they're higher than any other, and now Genghis or Temujin is forming it to be what it should have been all along, is one big country, one big clan, working together to be a successful nation.
Yeah, you're exactly right, because right now, these are all what he's doing right now. These are among Mongols. This isn't the Kiryat. This isn't the Tatars. These are Mongols is what the Jurchen are. You're exactly right. They are the exact same people. They're all interrelated. And it's just a few guys that are throwing kinks in the system. And he's about to be done with all of that.
Yeah. So I mean, if the listeners have in their mind like, wow, that just sounds like a chicken with its head cut off, like just people running around and don't know what to do. I mean, it kind of is that, but
Mm-hmm.
Temujin or Genghis Khan is putting that together right now. He is slowly in his mind. He knows what he's doing. He is slowly forming a nation of Mongols to where he then later doesn't have to rely on outsiders for help or, anything like that.
That's exactly right. He might be the only conqueror in history that had to build a nation before he started conquering the world.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause he definitely wasn't given anything. He took very little and built it to what it is at this time.
Yeah. And it is gonna get crazier as we go along. So, after he's established all of this and that this is going to be the new order, he took essentially this tribe of defeated black-bone people and was giving them that opportunity for the first time ever to share in the prosperity of an army. Whereas all the jerking aristocrats were gone, he'd sent that very clear message. Follow faithfully, and no matter who you are, you will be taken care of, and you will be rewarded. Attack me, your ass is grass. Now, as for his showdown with Jamaica, that's going to come in this next part 4 of Genghis Khan. What are your thoughts so far, Frank?
You're leaving us hanging here. I mean, it's starting to get real juicy and good, and I'm glad we're able to let our listeners kind of feel like, like shit, come on, like why can't it? So, no, I definitely think, this portion was less factual and more of just following the story, but I think it's a very important part of the story that leads up to how he gets that name Khan and why it is so professional, why it's such a higher name at that time. Like, we don't really understand why he came to be such a high ruler, and I feel like this little tidbit of a story in part 3 really helps. It helped me understand, but it also will help the listeners follow how he got to where he was.
Like, as we start getting into it, it's important to understand that there was no nation, and essentially what we're trying to show in this part, there was no nation of Mongols. They were constantly kept in a warring state by outside forces, by inside forces. So that to me is why Genghis Khan is also really, really unique, because think about it this way. Alexander already had a nation when he set out to conquer the world. The Romans, the Greeks, they all had that. He did not. He had to first build a nation in less than 20 years, and then in the next 25 years, take that newly formed nation and go conquer the world. Because the things that he did and implemented, they seem so simple to us now, but it was revolutionary in that part of the world. And in a way, it was a lot of knowledge that had been lost in the fall of much bigger civilizations. And he's about to implement a lot more of it really, really quickly. And it's kind of a testament to me how smart he was and how quickly he could put a plan together, and maybe just how long he had been thinking on all of this.
Yeah, I mean, history won't ever be able to tell us exactly, just because it goes back to no one was following him very closely at the time. It's all by hearsay, word of mouth, or small little scriptures that were taken from this.
You're exactly right. In less than the next 30, 40 years, these nations that he is about to be the conqueror and the ruler of didn't even know who the Mongols were or that they existed at this point. But they were going to know, and soon enough. It is extraordinary to me. I've never really done a deep dive in the course of any of my studies, in the course of my education, into Genghis Khan himself. So it has been, and of course, our only source that we're using is not the source that we're going with. We went with the source we went with because I think it's the best put together. I think it has the least amount of conjecture of everything else that I read. And again, we only know little tidbits, but what we do see is there has to be a great deal of truth in this somewhere, because we do know once he starts conquering other civilizations, These are the exact things that he put into order because these other civilizations had writing systems, and they began to really and truly record this. That he was doing these things with each of the nations, not just other tribes, but nations in the future he will do this with. So that's really, really interesting to me. He's coming for Jamaica for sure in the next part. It's going to be fun. So normally we would do our big, long counterculture about things that make us happy, but we're doing something a little more serious and doing our deep dive, and we have everything together. So I'm just going to do my quick usual plug for Care Rescue Texas on social media, carerescuetexas.com. They do amazing work for rescues, guys, especially big cats, which, as you all know, super near and dear to my heart. Frank, do you have anything for us that you'd like to give a shout out or a plug this week?
I mean, I'm definitely always about rescues for animals. My dog Travis, he was a rescue, and he is definitely near and dear to our hearts, and is definitely one of the best dogs I've ever had. I mean, we got him when he was 2 with Leighton, and they've grown up together, and he is so good with Elle. I mean, you never really know a story with a dog, but I mean, any love or any help that you can give to carerescue.com, I'm always down for. These dogs or animals, I don't want to say just dogs, sorry, I'm a dog lover, but any animal could use any love that you can give to it.
Care Rescue also does work with dogs. They do work with dogs, house cats, domestics. I think they even have lemurs. I was talking to Chris the other day. I know that they even have like lemurs, anything and everything that is brought to these people, they are all about caring for. So they absolutely, we're not saying not everybody has massive amounts of money to give, but even $1 helps, guys. If everybody gives just $1, it goes a really, really long way. So
yeah, they've got llamas.
Yeah, they've got everything, and it's really, really cool. It's actually down by Fort Worth. When we come back home, I think we're going to stop in there and go on the tour and kind of see everything, especially like the big cats and all the stuff that they do down there. But yeah, the llamas, the lemurs, everything, you could go in, you could interact with the animals. So we were going to go check it out. And I encourage, if you're in that area, go check it out. They love visitors. They love help. They need it. A lot of it. That does it for me, though, as far as plug everything. How about you?
I mean, you know me. One of my favorite podcasts is Stuff You Should Know.
I love that podcast.
And they definitely have a Genghis Khan one if anybody would be interested in listening to it. It's very short. I mean, it's not, I don't want people to get it confused. It's a very short, quick, right to the point. I mean, it's not long and drawn out or very descriptive as ours is. So, if you got a hot minute, take a listen. I think people will thoroughly enjoy it. I feel like it'll kind of put some of those big pieces together that people kind of may have missed because we went in such fine detail about it.
I agree. And I almost would encourage you before we deep dive into any of this, do go listen to that. Maybe even also, I don't know, they might just be for purchase now. I don't know if they're free anymore, but if you've got $1, go throw it at Hardcore History, the ever wonderful Dan Carlin. He does a 2-part. So I would encourage people also before we go farther, because we are fine tooth combing this, because I haven't found a podcast that's really taken the time to deep dive it yet, because it is a lot of work and it's a lot of grabbing things from here and from here and from here. But I think he's just so interesting, it needs to be done. But definitely go listen to the Stuff You Should Know. That way you kind of already have the overarching picture of where this story's going to go. I think that would actually be a great idea, personally.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for us this week. We're going to start getting down into some real rough Mongol nitty-gritty next week. Thank you guys so much for listening. I know that I didn't plug it earlier, but please go anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Subscribe, rate, review if you like what you're hearing. It's not for our ego. It's not to make us feel good, although it never hurts to say something nice about somebody. What it does do is help us on the business end, and it helps us move up the charts, which we will take every little bit of help that we can get. We drop every single Wednesday. And again, you can listen to us anywhere that you can possibly listen to podcasts. Also, go and follow us on social media. We're at Body Count Pod on Instagram and Twitter, Body Count Pod on Facebook. I'm Jessica B. Manor. That's Manor, which is a common question I get. So, like the house, not the behavior, at, at both Instagram and Twitter. Frank, where do people find you?
I'm definitely on Twitter, and I have seen a growth in Twitter just from following you. So thank you to everybody out there. I am at the Frank _ Garcia, and then Instagram is at the Frankie Garcia. Yes, at one point in time I did go by Frankie. That was a long childhood name, but more professional people, business side, kind of like Frank a little bit better. So I'm transitioning to that slowly.
I have made the transition already in my mind. So
definitely keep us updated with your Genghis grill trip.
Oh, I'm going to. I'm going to let you know how it is. I think I'm going to throw it out on Twitter because so many people are asking me and can't believe. So it's going out on Twitter once I have the delicious Genghis grill taste in my mouth. We'll all know. So next week when I come back, I will be able to speak to it. Okay. That does it. We're going to get back into the nitty gritty and a little less of the hardcore history when we come back next week for part 4 of Genghis Khan. Bye, everybody.